As a person living in an era of complex new ideologies and moral questions, my philosophical dwellings have led me to a path of new, enlightened ideology, that of African-exclusive anti-natalism. But first we must ask, what is anti-natalism? Anti-natalism is the concept that the inevitable amount of suffering and displeasure in life caused by bringing a child into the world is morally wrong, as by having a child you directly contribute to their suffering as they go through the various tribulations of life. As it is physically impossible to ask a developing fetus for consent, the act of bringing them into the world as opposed to not having them gain any form of consciousness at all is a moralistically evil and should be avoided. As base anti-natalists who are unemployed and live lives of squalor, we all naturally know that life is a horrible thing to be a part of, and that feelings of discomfort arise solely from a fundamental human condition as opposed to any personal choices we make in life. Simultaneously, we also know that fringe, baseless ideologies are the best means to operate our lives around, and with that we come to the concept of what I call ingrained domineering-oriented suffering, the inherent concept that humans will always seek to oppress and undermine groups around them for their own goal. And here we come to black people. It is well known that black people are universally oppressed by the current white system, and thus to expel the inherent power of a particular group over another, the logical conclusion is to deprive them of the resources they use to prop themselves up. A little history lesson, bigots. It is well known that for centuries black people have been under the oppressive and tyrannical yoke of white people. Indeed, as far back as the 14th century, we find examples of black populations en masse being oppressed despite their enormous contributions to society. It is not a coincidence that European societies started to develop quickly in the High Middle Ages, experiencing mass technological, scientific and cultural advancements, when at the same time these nations had populations that were in some cases up to 75% black. Indeed, in the early 15th century, 70% of the 15 million strong population of the French kingdom was of direct first-generation African descent, migrants of whom had repopulated Europe in the devastation after the Black Death, later contributing in the force of the massive technological advancements that followed, bringing Europe first up to par and later far ahead of much of the rest of the world. But who was really behind it? We know from widespread historical consensus that European societies did in fact have contact with the highly prosperous land of African peoples such as the Congolese, Beninese and Marawi, to name a few. However, it is also known that the white populations immediately were able to overpower and subdue these entire populations, despite them being majorities in their respective countries, forcing them into slavery and leeching off the backs of this culturally innovative, peaceful race of people. So now we know that the modern world system is built solely on the repression of black people. We may ask, where is the modern precedent? Well, naturally it is everywhere, with groups such as Black Lives Matter springing up constantly in the streets to inform us of this disastrous tyranny by the other race. You may have heard much about this group, and as anti-natalists we need to interpret its true message. Sure, Black Lives Matter, contemporary ones that exist in this precise moment, as no human being should experience the displeasures and suffering as life, as any anti-natalist would think, but do their offspring matter? No! Since we can see that the white tyranny will never be overthrown, it is inherently evil for any Black Lives Matter individual to procreate, as they are bringing yet another bright individual into the world who will be duly oppressed by the current system and experience mass suffering. Thus we come to my ultimate policy proposal, African-exclusive anti-natalism, the ideology that advocates for the abstention of black people from breeding such that their offspring cannot be exploited. There are two main reasons for self-sacrifice in the current global population. Number one, it would get back at white people. As we know, white people have never been able to do anything for themselves, and definitely do not have inherent geographical, biological superiority, having created the most advanced societies, technological and political systems on Earth. To deprive white people of their lifeblood, black people, it would be the greatest middle finger ever to the evil system in place. That would be pretty cool. Number two, the current system cannot be overthrown. despite the many heroic attempts at destroying small businesses and knocking over bins by groups such as Antifa and BLM. No amount of concentrated, organised violence is going to topple the system, as naturally no human being has any agency whatsoever, as we all know, being anti-natalists. No amount of new generations of black people will change this, as mass demographic change clearly can never change any system. And so the only logical way of overcoming the immense amount of black suffering and pain in the future is just to get rid of them. That's it. Just get rid of them. What we can do, and what you can do to stop white tyranny is simple. This worldview that I put extensive research into may only be my own ideology for 48 hours, but I know in time we can achieve unity and solidarity through heroic, overwhelming self-sacrifice. The duty is yours. Are you willing to accept it and save generations of future Africans from torment? Thank you for listening.